First, thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you to WeWork Labs. I want to say thanks and shout out to Casey and her team who did a great job in putting this on from making sure we got everybody here and doing the marketing. And this event is sponsored and brought to you by Sila and Tf Blotching. I'll let Shamir talk about Sila here in just a second. And yeah, when he introduced himself. So my name is Jonathan. I am the founder of Tf Blotching. We're a media company in the blockchain space, and we put on conferences here locally and abroad where we focus on advanced level topics and connecting people like these fine gentlemen up here who are innovators and startups in technology and connect them with corporate executives. I'm also the founder of a company called Every. We do, it's a MarTech company for retail and loyalty in the blockchain space. So with that, I'd love for each one of them to introduce themselves real quick to you. So Ben, why don't you go first?
My name is Ben. I'm the CEO of a startup called Hover. It is my second fintech startup. My co-founder and CTO here as well, David. We are focused on enabling in-app payments across emerging markets. Awesome, right there.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Matt Oppenheimer. I'm co-founder and CEO of Remitly. Remitly is an international payments company. Think of us like a mobile phone alternative to Western Union or MoneyGram. We're sending over $6 billion a year. And in terms of scale and size, we're close to 1,000 people worldwide. We've raised close to $200 million in equity. And most importantly, we've served over 1 million customers around the globe. And our customers tend to be immigrants who've moved from places like Mexico, India, Philippines. And it's very mission driven, just given that our customers are often underserved. And that's us.
Hi, everybody. It is hard going last after this crew, I have to say. So my name is Shamir. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sila, which is a fintech and crypto API platform. I'm not going to talk too much about it. I was also previously the co-founder of a startup called Simple, which was a neobank based down in Portland, Oregon. I've been in the Pacific Northwest for 7.5 years now. And yeah, I have a bunch of folks here. I think my co-founder Isaac is around somewhere. Where are you, Isaac? Oh, he's hiding somewhere. And we also have a couple of folks, Molly and Avery, doing demos in another room. So if you want to know more about Sila, ask away.
All right, so this panel is called Startup Evolution from a FinTech CEO perspective. So I'd love to understand just the evolution of your startup FinTech journey. Tell us more about that. Who wants to go first?
Matt,
Sure, I can go first. So I started Remitly close to 8 years ago. I was also living in Nairobi, Kenya. We were there at the same time, right? Roughly?
We didn't meet there.
Yeah, we didn't meet there, but we were there. I just followed Ben around. That's my strategy in life. And when I was living in Kenya, I obviously saw the problem that existed that Remitly is helping to solve. But the whole journey, I mean, the theme is, it's interesting to go from starting a company. I remember vividly being like at my place in Kenya where I decided to make the leap. I was doing mobile and internet banking for Barclays Bank, left there, moved back to Boise, Idaho, where I'm from. And in Boise, 5th generation Idahoan. So it's a great place, not a great place to build this business. So did Techstars Seattle? Are folks familiar with Techstars? Cool. Yeah, happy to share my thoughts and experience with that. But that was very helpful because I was not plugged into the product and engineering world. Our lead mentor ended up becoming a founder, our third founder. And then really things took off from there because he had built and sold a successful business to Amazon. And then I won't go through obviously every step of the journey. I think the early days are the most interesting in a lot of ways in terms of potentially what all of you are going through. So I'm happy to go through specific questions about those early days. But we raised $750,000 in seed capital early days. So while we've raised close to $200 million in equity now, like it started with a $750,000 round that we raised coming out of Techstars, and the rest just kind of kept building from there. The broader theme though is like my job is, we were just talking about this, like my job now is completely different than my job early days. And I've been pretty reflective about the skills required early days versus the skills required now and just how dramatically different they are. It's like completely different jobs and completely different skills required. So happy to dig into any of those topics, but I won't ramble now just in the interest of time.
I'll say that one. Yeah, my path, it was kind of a mistake. I think. So I graduated in 2010 with a liberal arts degree. Kind of hard to get hired at that time without a specific technical skill. And I kind of look at myself as an economic migrant. I don't remember the path that took me to Nairobi, but I moved to Kenya to find employment, and I started a company there. It wasn't the path that I intended. It wasn't the path that I planned. But once I saw kind of what's involved in how much you learn, how much you're challenged in a startup environment, but also just how interesting fintech is. I mean, it's kind of binary. You're either going to love fintech or just be completely kind of eyes glossed over about it. I fell into the former camp and just I couldn't stop going down the rabbit hole. So a fortunate mistake, and I probably will stick in this career for as long as I know.
And real quick, or Shamir, maybe you can just answer this. What is fintech?
Oh, well, that's a hard question. So my story is like I used to be a software engineer, graduated in the last millennium, so that will date me, and then worked for a while, came over to the US, went to business school. I have a couple of my B-school classmates here, and then didn't know what to do with life after business school, so I became a consultant and worked at McKinsey for a while. Fell into financial services because they put me on financial projects, and I just kept doing more. So I kind of learned a lot about finance, right? It wasn't called fintech back then. And then in 2009, a classmate from business school started asking me all these questions and then sent me an email saying, let's start a retail bank. And it was just like, what? Start a bank? I mean, it just seemed like such a crazy idea. I had more experience shutting down banks than starting them. I mean, this was 2009, right? My last project before that was like $1 trillion bankruptcy. But then I was like, the world really needs this, right? Like banks suck and we need to make them better. And so I started talking with him. His name was Josh. And then a few months later, I was actually in Brussels at the time, quit McKinsey, moved back to the US, moved to New York, and started going down the fintech route. And I think fintech is just like financial technology, right? And it's a weird thing because honestly, finance has always been technology. It's like I think the first IBM mainframe sale in like 1950s was to a bank. They made them and started selling them to the government to like do like missiles and calculations. And then the first commercial sale was actually to a bank because banks needed the technology. Otherwise, they'd have thousands of people adding up numbers just to keep track of the money. So banks have always been about technology. All finance has been fintech forever. What fintech really means today is kind of this new wave, right? It's not about the big mainframe era technology from the 70s. It's about modern tech built for end users. And really, I think it's more of like almost like a mission-driven philosophy of like, we are going to build products, services, which really help people. And a lot of it comes from like that 2008 crisis where people are like, banking sucks and how do we fix this? I think that's kind of the motivating thing about a lot of fintech startups coming out of that 2008, 2009 timeframe. What do you guys think?
Definitely. So it's interesting they say that, right? There's a need because it's this traditional thing. And Matt, I want to just touch on what you were talking about when you're describing Remitly, how you serve the underserved, right? And perhaps most in need of banking type services. How did you even think about that, or what are the interesting things that you've learned as a result of making a product for underserved?
Yeah, I think that before Kenya, I traveled to close to 100 countries throughout my life. So
I had no idea.
Yeah, even though fifth generation Idahoan, my parents always really valued travel. So we went to places in Latin America when I was 6 years old. We went to Asia when I was 7. And I saw how much inequality there was in a lot of these countries, which as a 6-year-old is actually pretty hard to rationalize. And I saw how I really didn't see remittances then, but it was a complex issue for me in terms of inequality and just poverty actually in a lot of countries. Thankfully, if you look at ARC for a lot of reasons, there's still a lot of poverty in the world, but it's trending in the right direction. And when I was in Kenya, I saw how far remittances went in people's lives. But I think our customers I think are even more underserved. But I'll go back to the point you made, which I do think that fintech is built on the fact that a lot of financial services companies have what I call like a begrudging trust Like, it's interesting. Like, our customers, you think you give them the best price and the best experience, they just flock to us. But they use Western Union because they trust it and because they know that if I send $250 of my hard-earned money and I make $20,000 a year, it's going to get home. And I think that folks forget that within fintech at times, that it's not only about building a phenomenal product, it's about building that trust. But like, people are happy to jump ship from whether it's a Western Union, MoneyGram, or a traditional bank because they don't love it. Like, those are not loved brands. And so it creates this huge opportunity. And I also think people have been talking about fintech since like the late 90s. But it's really, if you look at that trust adoption curve, at least for our customer base, only 30% of remittances right now are originated digitally. 70% is still like physical cash locations. That is rapidly growing, and that shift is happening very, very quickly. But 10, 15 years ago, like trusting smartphones, the iPhone came out in 2007, trusting a desktop, a lot of which our customers didn't have, was for financial services, was just a non-starter. Now, that shift's happening. So I think that within fintech, there's a lot of interest in it right now because that trust shift, I think, is happening amongst not only our customer base, but around the globe.
Yeah, totally. I'd love to kind of pry in a little bit more on that, what you're talking about there. I'm assuming a lot of you are here because you want to hear from CEOs that have built companies, right? And so when we think about startups, we think so much about technology and you're building a tech company. But like you said, there's trust, there's marketing, there's branding, there's the productization. Ben, you want to talk a little bit about that? Just how you or someone want to touch on that? Like, how there's the tech side, but how do you actually build that trust?
Yeah, I guess I'll just start by saying that I continue to be amazed how much of my time is really around people and just managing people and teammates. And managing is the wrong word, but it's really people is everything. And actually, I think it's not hard to do 10 times better than the status quo from a technical perspective. And so, like, it's actually not just the tech. I think one of the things, Matt, you've done really well is like a culture, like building a culture and a team that can attract and retain the best talent. That to me is way more important than the tech. The tech is known. I mean, you just get, I'm going to take these 10 blocks and put them together in this unique way, and it's done. Yeah. I didn't answer your question.
No, that's good.
Sure. I mean, so trust is something that we thought about a lot in the early days of Simple, right? Because we'd go and we pitch VCs in 2010, and most VCs didn't know anything about fintech. Like, they didn't know anything about banking, and we had VCs tell us that the banking works great. I love my bank. Like, really? You like your bank? You're like the first person I found in this country, right? And then they'd explain, and I'm like, oh no, you don't love your bank. You love your banker. And there's a person at the bank who takes care of it, because you live in a different world than 99% of humanity, right? So that itself was a huge thing, and we spent a lot of time. We had I think over 10,000 email conversations and hundreds of in-person and phone conversations with potential users. And what we learned is that it's not that customers are loyal to banks. It's just that customers are lazy. And they're also scared, right? Like, they know that they don't like the bank, they don't like the experience, they hate lots and lots of things about it. And yet they have figured out a way over time of how to make it work in their life. And money is such a core, deep part of their psyche, right? Like, it's every year, the top New Year's resolutions in this country are about two things. It's either health or wealth. And it's people want to get physically healthier, or they want to get financially healthier. And that's kind of how deep-seated your sense of wealth is truly tied to your self-worth. So people are very nervous about trying anything or any new change. But once you get them over that, right, and that's not easy, right? Like, getting people to say, hey, I am going to ditch this bank that I've had an account at for 10 years, or I've been transferring money through Western Union for 7-8 years and hate it, but it works. Like, getting them to try something new is hard. But on the flip side, once you get them to try it and they actually use it and they like it, then it's transformation. Like, you don't get just oh yeah, it's a cool product, I use it. No, you get customer love. Like, you get rabid customers who will just go and shout from the rooftops about you. They'll send you emails. The it's very validating to kind of get that customer love, but there's no easy way of getting over that hump, right? Like you have to find a way of getting people to hear about you, understand what you do, then go out and actually give you a try. And that's expensive, especially at scale. But once you get there, if you can build the right product and the right onboarding process, then at the end of it, you get some very loyal customers. And you can see it in the data too.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is one, we're talking about in the consumer world, but I think some of these principles apply in B2B, but anyone thinking about starting a consumer fintech business, it is going to be way more capital intensive than you think it'll be. Like I went back to one of our original decks, I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was like $5 million will be profitable and huge. And the way that a fintech, especially consumer fintech business works, is just not like that. There's a trust ecosystem that'll take a lot of capital. There's regulatory requirements and net worth requirements. There's fraud prevention, which takes a huge amount of product to build. There's compliance product you got to build. There's all this back end. Then there's the front end. So you've got all the fixed costs like you would for a regular tech startup in terms of headcount and investment, but it's going to be more for a fintech company. Then once you've done that, the top of funnel like acquisition of customers is, if you want to grow very quickly, takes a lot of capital. Now, as Shamir said, once you've got that customer in the door, they stay with you forever. So the fundamentals of the business of a consumer fintech, not all, but a lot of consumer fintech businesses are really strong over time because of that loyalty. But it just takes a lot. It's taken a lot more capital than I thought it would take to build a very large fintech company. And I think that it also, within those payments subsection, obviously, of fintech, there are economies of scale that the largest companies win. And so getting access to that capital to get to that scale, there's kind of chicken and egg problems, I think, for early stage startups, and we've been there, but it's just taken way more capital than I thought it would be to build out that entire trust ecosystem.
I was just going to add on the fintech, and maybe I wanted to check with you guys, but I feel like fintech is one of those things where, in my limited experience, like this is not a move fast and break things kind of industry, like the acceptable margin of error when you're moving people's money.
For a second. Limited experience.
Okay.
Oh, you're the second fintech startup.
I'll accept it. Thank you. Very gracious. But yeah, you can't mess up. And if you're starting from the ground up, and if infrastructure isn't available to you to kind of accelerate your entry to market, you have to build all of it, and you can't mess up.
Yeah, and yeah, that's applicable to lots of startups out there, right? You know, different industries and so forth. I love what you're all talking about when it comes to switching costs. A lot of times we think about, oh, I have this great idea and I want to create whatever startup, and if I can just put it in users' hands. But really, it's what does it take for someone to say, okay, though your product might be better, I have to pull my money out of my bank. I have to stop using the processes that I'm used to, right? Like there needs to be that solving of that pain. So, you know, with that, you know, a couple of us are in blockchain. I wanted to ask a couple of questions of blockchain because I know some of you are here about that. Shamir, why so you have this fintech experience, now you're doing fintech at blockchain. Why do you think of blockchain?
That's a good thing it's empty. I guess you wanted to. So this really resonates with me. Like Matt, your last point, like building a fintech is a long and pretty expensive process, right? Just building all the backend infrastructure to connect to the payments networks and do all this stuff takes years. Then you get to build your UI on top of it, and then you have to iterate to get the product market fit so that you can drive down those acquisition costs and make users happy. But then iteration is slow as well, because every time you need to change the backend, then that's extremely complex and painful. And that's something we felt at Simple, right? Between quitting my job at McKinsey and launching Simple, it took 2.5 years. And we're lucky that we got some very patient investors, because usually investors expect to see a launch in 6 months, right? For a tech startup. It's not that crazy. Like I've spoken to pretty much a large number of neobank startups out there, whether it's Timo in Vietnam or N26 in Europe or Project Neon in Brazil. If you do it in 18 months or less, you're actually doing great. 2 years is about average to launch a fintech startup. And the more complex it is, the longer it takes anywhere in the world. And then once you launch, iterating is hard. And part of it is just the regulatory issues. But part of it is just that, especially in the US, the core tech sucks. Right? Like ACH is how everybody gets their paychecks, how most money, 40 trillion transferred every year in the US via ACH. That's like a batch file based processing system. The first, it was run in like 1973, right? And that's how, still the same thing, right? Like it's that era of technology. So there's only so much you can do with that. Now, some countries like India, Kenya, and other places have more modern like payment systems, but there is no global payment system. There is no global like standard. And I think that for me, that is the attraction of blockchain. And I'll be totally honest, it still has a long way to go. Josh and I first looked at like Bitcoin back in 2010, and we were like, oh, really fascinating to see a distributed ledger. Never seen that before. Couldn't have thought of how to do it without seeing it. But there's still, a lot of ways to go before this can really work and scale. It's gotten better, but that's still true. And I think that promise is there. That ability to kind of have one platform that's actually available to the entire world, where everybody can transact together and transfer value. And that's the attraction to Sila, at least, of blockchain. But the reality is that if you're providing services to end users today, you also need to provide a bridge, right? Like nobody can build a large startup right on top of a blockchain yet, because that's not where 99% of the world holds its wealth. It's all held in dollars or different currencies. And so you need a way of going from traditional payment systems to the blockchain. And that's what Sila fundamentally is. So that was actually for me the driving force, and for all of us at Sila to build it, was how do we get that time frame to build a fintech from like 2 years down to 2 months, maybe even 2 weeks? How do we take that huge capital investment and convert it into a variable cost? And that's what Sila is.
Awesome. Yeah, banking is definitely one of the best use cases for blockchain. You were talking about ACH. I always love to ask questions like, has anybody here ever sent out a wire, right? Like, has anybody ever sent out a wire after 5 o'clock Eastern? No, you haven't actually, because you can't, right? Like, you can't send a wire after 5 o'clock Eastern. It's closed. Matt, awesome payments and so forth. Have you thought about blockchain at all for Remitly? Kind of take us just through that thought process. Does it make sense for you, or what you can share with us?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, there's probably a lot of folks in this room and definitely on this panel that can teach me a lot about blockchain. But digital currencies and blockchain have been something that I have focused on since basically starting the company. I was on a panel back in 2011, right after I started the company, with Gavin Andreessen, who's one of the core developers for Bitcoin. And I'm really bad at speculation because Bitcoin was like pennies at that point. Yeah. But it's interesting how it's I did not buy any because Coinbase wasn't out there. But it's interesting how it's evolved. And I do want to touch on Bitcoin for a second, because I think it just, my reflection is there was a period in 2012, 13, 14 where everyone was like, Bitcoin's going to crush you. Like we went and raised our Series A at that point. It was like, good luck, buddy. Like investors were just like, you're going to get crushed. It's not going to happen, because Bitcoin's going to be a default global currency, and that's going to disrupt, remittances. Which, by the way, if Bitcoin ever did become that, or any digital currency did, it would totally disrupt us, and it would totally disrupt a lot of companies out there. But that initial iteration around Bitcoin, Bitcoin, in my view, has become more of a store of value than a medium of exchange, getting your payroll, doing merchant payments, P2P payments. So now the focus is on blockchain. And when I thought a lot about Bitcoin, especially as I was building the business, I was like, I always come back to the customer and say, like, what is the customer value? And the customer could be someone like us, like Ripple would be an example. We could integrate with Ripple. That's one that we pay a lot of attention to. Or the customer could be an end consumer. I'm seeing more, how can financial services institutions like us integrate with blockchain technologies to drive down our costs and therefore make it less expensive for customers, or faster, to your ACH point. And that's where I'd love to learn from you all in this room around what other blockchain technologies you're seeing that financial services companies can use. I'm less bullish on any digital currency or blockchain technology right now that I'm seeing going direct to consumer, partially because some of the reasons I mentioned, like trust is hard to build. It can make total logical sense. This is like something that just has surprised me again and again building this business 7 or 8 years. Make total logical sense for consumers, but shifting consumer behavior patterns when it comes to financial services is very hard. So in general, but with a very open mind, I'm more bullish on blockchain around how can it help the enterprise.
Have you thoughts towards that with your company, or?
Yeah, you go. I'll do both next time. No, we've never toyed Bitcoin. We very cynically in an old pitch deck in my last company put it in there and said we could accept Bitcoin with our Kenyan merchants at the point of sale if that would make you invest in us. It didn't, so that didn't work. But no, it's not. It's too speculative. It's too volatile. We're looking at emerging markets exclusively where there's almost a duty of care to make sure that you're making decisions that at least kind of put some bounds around what an end user can do. But I think it's important to just make the point that you don't need to know what TCP/IP is or that it's being used for you to use the internet. And I think this is something that we in the industry could really kind of internalize a little bit more. No one cares, like regular people and the people that we would want to see eventually using this kind of technology, whether they know it or not. It's not interesting that it's distributed ledger technology. We don't even necessarily need to be talking about how it works under the hood. What is under the hood is absolutely disruptive and revolutionary. But I think your point on I didn't do it because Coinbase didn't exist is exactly right. Right, like the kind of the Sila type that you have to put this wrapper, you have to make this complex thing really simple and accessible. And unless we do that as an industry, then it's never going to happen.
Yeah, totally. Like you're saying, customers don't care that you're using blockchain; they care that their information is secure, or they care that they have the privacy. They have those aspects to that. So I think the last question that I want to ask you all before we dive into some questions is, what do you think is what's on the next frontier? What's the next evolution? What's coming up the pipe for fintech?
So what I'm excited about is just the API revolution, right? Like, so the numbers I saw in an old McKinsey deck is like global financial services revenue is like 6 trillion a year. And just to put that in scale, I think global like advertising revenue is like 500 billion. So the whole market that Google and Facebook make all their money in, financial services is 10 times larger. I mean, think about it, right? Like, of course, finance drives the world. So does manufacturing. So does transportation. This whole internet revolution, first thing it did was change everything in advertising. And it's only now that you're beginning to see the traditional economy, those real building blocks getting disrupted by the internet. And finance is one of the hardest. Matters a lot to everybody from like the largest company down to the individual person. And in that sort of 6 trillion of global revenue, the innovators, the fintechs, whatever you want to call it, have probably taken maybe 100 billion. So, all of it from PayPal down to Sila has made maybe not even a percentage point difference in that. But that revolution is starting and it's picking up more and more speed. And one of the things that really excites me is helping that. Because I really think that even PayPal, which is now 20 plus years old, but all the newer startups out there really making lives better for everybody. And that we need to do more of that. And so the tooling that's available is getting better and better, right? Like you had PayPal, which was a direct to consumer product, but they built an API platform like 10 years ago, PayPal X. It sucked. Then Braintree came along. That was better. Now Stripe came along a little bit after. That's much, much better. And they're all great, but they do only very specific things and they cover specific parts of the market. But more and more companies that have built large and successful fintech products are rolling out platforms so that the next wave of innovators don't have to rebuild all that backend infrastructure. And I think there's definitely a blockchain revolution, but that blockchain revolution might still be a few years off. Just before that, I think we're going to see a platform revolution as more and more startups realize that, hey, I don't need to spend 2 years trying to get to market. I can use Stripe, Plaid, TransferWise or Remitly, and maybe Sila, and maybe Hubbard. I pulled all of this together and I got my product to market in 3 months instead of like the 2 years before. And now I can spend less money on building backend and more money on getting the product market fit. And that revolution will enable a lot more startups and drive a lot more change.
I'll speak about payments specifically, and I think what is coming in the future of payments is first, within remittances, it's going to become much more digitized, which is obvious, but that shift is happening now and it's happening fast. I think the second thing is payments will become faster and they'll become more affordable. Like it's just inevitable as well. The ACH example you mentioned, like it is asinine. And if you really double click, and if you want a beer later, I can tell you about why that is. And there's a lot of entrenched interest. Whether it's blockchain technology, whether it is like the European, what they did is they basically said we're regulating debit cards and we're enforcing that bank transfers have to be faster. And so there was a regulatory solution in Europe, but there's so much focus on blockchain payments and in just making that faster and cheaper that it will become more digitized, faster, cheaper. That's not exactly rocket science, but I do think people have been saying it for 15 years, and I think that actually, you talked about blockchain being a little further off. I think payments becoming faster and cheaper, it'll look dramatically different on a global basis in the next 5 years.
Pose the question to you real quick, and I want you to spend 30 seconds real quick talking to your neighbor, ideally someone that you didn't come here with. And what do you think is next on the fintech or the blockchain horizon? Give yourselves about 30 seconds real quick to talk about
that. I'm involved a bit in the real estate space, and I think around where we've already seen a couple of deals already where we have blockchain-based, what I would call smart securities, because it solves a real problem in the space. And I think we'll see that 100x this year, which is still tiny when it comes to the entirety of the real estate market. But I do think that is an early space that will see traction because of the problems that it actually solves.
Cool. Thanks. If you have a question, why don't you come over here where Riley is? I'll kind of pretend like he's a mic stand, and we'll go from there.
All right, this question for the whole panel. I'm curious as to how do you keep financial interests? How do you keep the interest of your investors when you're serving markets, emerging markets in Africa and Asia, where the margin cost might eat the transaction cost? How do you serve those people?
Oh God, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one, and I think if you kind of look at the last 10 years or so, there was this kind of boom of social enterprise as a category, and then there was the evolution of kind of the benefit corporation or the L3C, and there was this kind of grappling philosophically with, can I make money and do good at the same time? Personally, I've come back to just the kind of plain vanilla, Delaware C Corp type route and like raise venture capital and just don't be a jerk is kind of how I've tried to grapple with it, but I don't have a good answer. I think we have to be extremely mindful of our expenses. And we know that, Shamir is absolutely right. He's talking about 2-year lead times. Take that and just add, I can't even say what amount, but add a significant amount in emerging markets because so much infrastructure that we have access to isn't available. And there are so many other frictions that those entrepreneurs have. I don't have a great answer. I just control costs and move deliberately.
First of all, I applaud all of you for entering the payment space and achieving the success you have. It's a very crowded space, both B2B and B2C. I have really two-part question. The first one is, as you think about the landscape going forward, you mentioned ACH and some of the other data technologies. The question is, how do you think about that evolving with new technology and new business models?
I'm going to broaden it from ACH to include also like Swift, like you mentioned, the 35 days. Like it's all in a similar vein, and I think that when I say payments getting faster and more affordable, like what we did is we basically said no customer wants to send money to the Philippines in 3 days, and no one wants to pay the $30 wire transfer. So it's hard to build out the infrastructure, but we just built it out. Like we started with the Philippines. We did like 6 integrations just in the Philippines to enable cash pickup instantly at 10,000 cash pickup locations instantly, or deposits into millions of bank accounts instantly. The only way we did that was that backend infrastructure that we built out. Now that's the remittances example disrupting Swift. I think there's a lot of domestic companies that are saying, how can I disrupt ACH, and whether they're blockchain based or not, like that's where I have a lot of confidence that it's just going to change. Like it's silly that ACH is as slow as it is. And I think now's the time where it actually will start to change.
However, can I argue with you one
Yeah,
second?
sure.
They still have scale and you don't, right? Swift has scale. They just partnered with R3, right?
Yeah.
Globally. They're not giving up without a fight. However, your technology sounds superior. The question then is, how do you gain scale? Compared to Swift or ACH,
Yeah, and I think that's where we have raised a lot of capital to get to scale. I also think, though, that our business is a little different than even ACH because most of our transactions are picked up in cash. So TransferWise and other companies are going after the like Swift bread and butter, where we have a cash component where we do it instantly. And Western Union's probably an analogy. They're trying to get it faster and cheaper and better, but that's an easier battle to fight in some ways because it's classically disruptive to their business, right?
Sorry, can you just please comment on China before I disappear?
Yeah. Or if either of you have thoughts on China too, so I don't.
You can go.
Yeah,
Well, so people talk a lot about China, and I will say that the Ant Financial and all of those revolutions that are happening there are in a way they're happening because the China like 15 years ago, its financial infrastructure truly sucked, and there was a massive problem. And these, whether it's Tencent, whether it's Ant, they came out, they got a lot of customer adoption. They don't have the same barriers between industry and finance that we do here in the US. That's why Google and Facebook don't have banks. But guess what? The Chinese Googles and Facebooks can become banks, and they did, and they took over that space. It's partially because I think actually the traditional Chinese banks suck even more than the traditional US banks. They are spreading out across Southeast Asia and Europe, but what's driving that growth right now is not yet so much in-country massive adoption like they have in China, but it's actually acceptance of the global Chinese traveler. When you think about it, Americans go all around the world, they're tourists, and everybody recognizes the dollar in all these places because Americans come and spend greenbucks, right? There's 1.5 billion Chinese, and they are traveling, and they come with their, do you accept China Union Pay or Alipay? If you don't, you're not going to get the Chinese tourists. So suddenly every business in Europe, in Barcelona, or in Rome, or in Paris, they all want to accept Alipay, and the volumes are rocketing. Not because the Spanish are suddenly using Ant to transfer money between them or banking with Ant. No, it's to accept payments from the Chinese traveler. When you start seeing the in-country adoption of those Chinese platforms, that's when you'll really see the Chinese revolution go global. It's happening in a few places in Asia, but not in Europe, and I don't think it's that big just yet. And I'll stop there because that's my view.
I just have a basic question because this has been my second talk that I've heard that. So software companies have eaten like traditional companies, and now API companies have eaten software companies. Now, what's the next thing that would eat the API companies? It's just a curiosity.
Is the blockchain, because and the blockchain technologies are not there yet. Like people talk about Web 3, and like we're not even done with Web 2 yet. Web 2 has a lot of legs, even Web 1. But I do think that the next steps after that will be more and more sort of intrinsic code running and living on the internet, and people just interacting with it in a daily way without even realizing, just like they do with the internet. But I think that's still a ways away, and it feels like it's like the API revolution in like 2005. Yeah, there were APIs. Who had massive platforms? Along came AWS, and then Twilio, and then here we are, right? So.
Hi, my name is Gillian. I am curious about, technology is going to be the heart and soul of any startup. But when you guys first started, how did you prioritize lead generation and customer acquisition, especially with limited resources? And from there, as time went on, how did those methods change as you had more resources as the company grew?
2 cents on that. The first thing we did was focus. So while we have always had a bold vision, we just focused on US and Philippines, and we did that for years. While we got the infrastructure set up and while we learned about our customer. And so focus was big. By focus, we also were able to, we did things initially. There was a podcast actually from the Airbnb founder that stuck with me, which was early days, find marketing channels that don't scale. And so we went to South Center Mall in near the airport. There's a Seafood City restaurant, grocery store there, where a lot of folks shop that are our customers. There's like a Philippine National Bank and a Bank of the Philippine Island branch right there. They're kind of think like Western Union. We rented the booth in front of it. And so we just talked to customers and got to know them. It was no way scalable as a marketing channel, but it helped us interact and get to know our customers, iterate on our product. Once we had that, then we again focused and we were like, all right, let's advertise on the Filipino channel, which you can subscribe to on Comcast. It is exactly our customer base. So focus was key. And then also doing marketing that doesn't scale early days with the intent of trying to get to know customers better.
That's a great question.
And just a comment, like Filipinos really love to remit back to the country. That's why I think it was a good.
Thanks.
Can I add a
Thanks,
quick-
Clark.
Hold on, let's let him just answer your question as well.
Actually, go for it. I lost my train of thought.
I was gonna say, what advice do you have for early stage startups? As obviously the technology is going to be the focus, but as they begin to grow and they have investors, what advice would you give?
I disagree with that. The technology should not be the focus. The customer should be the focus. And if the technology, I mean, it's useful to help you achieve a goal, and the goal is serving the customer. So the more you can be focused on the customer, especially as a CEO or co-founder, that's the most important thing. And I think discovering and understanding the customer early on and defining that better is most important. And I mean, like, I'm sure Matt and Ben have their stories. My story is that, like, it took us 2.5 years to launch Simple. We weren't sitting around on our hands then. we actually had a sign-up list where we had 200,000 people who signed up to that. And we actually emailed the first 10,000 people individually, me and Josh, and even Alex. And we had like roughly 10,000 email conversations. We would print people would give us like 7-page emails. And we had them for years, and we printed them and stuck them on the walls of the office because we learned so much. I thought I knew banking before. Now I know that I don't know anything about it.
But I wanted to get your thoughts on B2B fintech, institutional payments, corporations. What opportunities do you see in that space going forward?
I can comment on kind of like, especially around sub-Saharan Africa is a big focus for us, and around Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya are kind of the priority markets right now. And it's entirely different. So the opportunity there, I think, is in just it's foundational, and so you don't have the fundamental building blocks yet. So if I'm starting a company here, we've been saying I use Plaid for linking bank account and Twilio for SMS. Those blocks largely don't exist in a lot of these markets, and so I think the opportunity there is build the blocks, be the infrastructure, make it available as a service, and that's what we're prioritizing. I suspect it's very different here. I don't know if you want to get into like the challenges of B2B kind of sales that we've encountered, but maybe afterward I could share that.
That'd be great.
I'm a co-founder of a little blockchain company called Tokenopoly. We work in the commercial or wholesale space. We had the vision of using blockchain as a way of pricing, let's say, commodities contracts that were not easily tradable on existing platforms. And regulatory headwinds have kind of cooled let's say the winds haven't been blowing in our direction for a while. But along the way, we looked at stuff like retail transactions and the potential role of blockchain. And the general question I have came out of the reference of PayPal. I'm familiar with Remitly. I think it's a great idea. I'm a little bit familiar with the other stuff. But PayPal, as I understand it, was founded to actually do consumer transactions and micropayments. And it's not from lack of intelligence or lack of resources or anything else like that they've never succeeded. It seems to be endemic in the US, not just ACH, but card processing, that somehow the infrastructure is missing. Like I'm not that knowledgeable of stuff overseas, but I've heard anecdotes that India has a very effective micropayments platform. Right, that's what I've heard.
Way better.
Amazingly better.
Right, okay, so, and if you can do micro, it means you have low trend. It's not so much that people need to go spend nickels and dimes, it's that if you do that, then all these other things follow. And so when I hear that, I end up thinking the problem is an infrastructure one that by definition is cross-institutional, cross-company, and therefore by definition can't be solved by a company. Right? Like the internet wasn't the first network. BitNet existed, but it was IBM specific. There are a lot of subnetworks, but until DARPANET said, forget that, it's a government project, thank you, Al that actually gets built, that has a standard protocol that anyone can adhere to, we're all here today because of business is booming because of the internet, right? So is that what's needed? I mean, my basic question is what's missing at the US level and can a company solve it? Have you guys looked at that and said, actually what's needed is a protocol. Actually what's needed is fill in the blank. That's my real question.
Fabric about India and kind of the whole India Stack Revolution is driven by a nonprofit called iSpirit, where I volunteer. I help do a little bit of it, small pieces. And I can talk about that for days. It's so far ahead of anything in the US and most places in the world that it blows the minds of people when they understand that revolution. But it requires both a vision and kind of the government ability to just ram change down the throats of like the entire banking industry, which is just not possible in the US political context, right? In India, like 80% of the banking industry is controlled by state-owned banks. The government does what it wants and it tells everybody else. It just doesn't work that way in the US. And there's no simple answer, right? Like you need to have a massive infrastructure change, which then enables a massive change at the application layer. The UPI, which is the Unified Payment Interface, was launched in September of 2016, and it did 700 million transactions last month. It's the fastest growing payments network in the history of mankind. Just because
where is that located?
In India, okay, right? And but it's because it started by having like universal adoption and huge government push, and it was very, very well designed, right? That's just not going to happen in the US. And I think the real opportunity, and I don't see how it could. I don't see how the US could ever deploy centrally a massive new payments infrastructure like India has already done. The only way it's going to happen in the US is by sort of people all adopting something new. The real question is, can the US actually move to something even further ahead of India? Because trying to catch up with India is never going to happen. The only option is, can the US leapfrog? And I think that option really only exists in the blockchain world, but it's still going to be a few years.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Let's give a big round of applause to our panel for being here. They will be here for a little bit and be willing to talk to you and ask questions with you, answer your questions. We're able to stay here at WeWork Labs till 8 o'clock, so I encourage